At our wedding planning dinner, my fiancée said, I need to see if my ex still. So I sold the house, and I always thought I'd know when something was falling apart. You imagine there'd be a crash, a scream, something undeniable to alert you when the foundation of your life begins to crack. But for me, it was a slow rot, quiet and perfectly disguised as routine. My name's Grant. I'm 33, and for 5 years I believed I was building a future with Melody, a woman I'd met at a backyard birthday cookout hosted by a mutual friend in Savannah. She wasn't loud, but she knew how to hold a room. Confident posture, quick wit, eyes that didn't flinch when she challenged someone. I was hooked from the first conversation. That night we talked about cities we wanted to live in, dreams we hadn't told anyone else. And by the end of it, I knew I wasn't just infatuated, I was wrecked. Things moved quickly, but never recklessly. Within a year, she moved into my place. Technically my house, paid for with a chunk of inheritance from my grandfather, but we treated it like ours. She picked the art, I built the shelves. She added plants I always forgot to water, and I rewired the dim hallway lights she hated. We cooked dinner together most nights, rotated between her chaotic Spotify playlists and my jazz records, and if anyone had asked me to describe our life, I would have said simple, calm, right? The kind of love that didn't need drama to feel real. When I proposed last fall, it wasn't with fireworks or rose petals, just quiet certainty over steak and sweet potatoes in our kitchen. She cried, threw her arms around me, whispered yes a dozen times, and for a moment I really believed that was the start of something permanent. We toasted with cheap wine, sat on the couch in sweatpants, and started talking dates, venues, colors. Everything felt light. Everything felt solid. At first, she was all in on the planning. She sent me links to rustic venues in North Carolina with big glass windows overlooking pine forests and still lakes. We debated whether to serve pie or cake, laughed over our terrible guest list draft, and spent Sunday mornings arguing about tulips versus ranunculus for centerpieces I didn't even know people cared about. It felt like a joint project, a build-your-own dream kit that we'd ordered together and started assembling with excitement. But as winter rolled in, something shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but just enough to throw me off balance. She started dodging the small stuff. At first it was innocent. I'm too tired to look at menus tonight, babe. Then it was, I'll pick my bridesmaids soon, there's no rush. The Pinterest boards stopped updating. The venue tours got postponed. I'd bring something up and she'd nod absently or change the subject. There was no argument, no fight, just a subtle disinterest that began to linger between us like a draft in the walls you can't quite find. I told myself it was work stress. She freelanced as a designer and had taken on a demanding campaign for a big hotel chain, juggling deadlines with nightmare clients. I even blamed myself at one point, thinking maybe I hadn't been enthusiastic enough, hadn't done my part to make planning feel fun. So I started suggesting date nights again, booked a weekend away in Asheville, tried to show her this wasn't just her thing, that I was in it too. She smiled and thanked me. Always polite, always soft-voiced, but there was a gap growing between her affection and her presence, and I was starting to feel like I was in a relationship with a memory. Still, I didn't panic. Not then. You don't burn down a house because the plumbing groans or the heater skips a beat. You patch things. You keep showing up. The night that rattled me didn't even start as anything significant. We were out at a local bar with some friends, people from both our circles, my old roommate Troy, her coworker Lynette, a couple of couples we'd gotten close with during pandemic game nights. Somebody brought out a stack of those dumb card prompts, the kind that ask intrusive questions and get everyone tipsy and confessional. Usually, Melody hated that kind of thing. She'd roll her eyes and say, "Why do people need cards to be honest?" But that night, she played along, laughed, took a few sips of sangria, and leaned in. Then someone asked, if you could relive one past relationship, which one would you pick? It was stupid, a throwaway prompt. But without missing a beat, Melody said, probably Drew. I didn't move, didn't react. But in my chest, something dropped. Drew, her ex from her college years in Charleston. The guy who cheated on her with a bartender and then lied about it until she caught him red-handed. She'd mentioned him before in passing, never fondly. But now, in front of 10 people, she named him like a favorite movie she could quote line for line. The table went quiet. She laughed awkwardly and added, "Not like I'd actually want to. It's just, he was a big part of that time in my life, you know." I didn't say a word for the rest of the night. On the way home, she chatted like nothing had happened. I watched the city blur past the windshield and wondered how long she'd been thinking about him like that. When we got inside, I asked, calmly, because rage wouldn't help, "Why would you say, Drew?" She blinked like she didn't understand the question. It was just a game. I didn't mean anything by it, but it stuck. And once that thought rooted in my brain, I couldn't unsee the pattern. Her late nights on her phone, the messages she always swiped away if I got near. The weekends she started spending at her mom's house without much explanation. I told myself I was paranoid, that everyone second guesses things before they get married. But the weight in my gut was growing, and I couldn't pretend much longer. Everything came to a head one Friday when I came home early. I'd skipped out on a late client call, wanting to surprise her, maybe cook dinner and salvage whatever softness we had left. But when I walked in, she was sitting on the couch with her laptop closed, just staring at the blank screen like it had personally betrayed her. "You're home early," she said flatly. Not happy, not surprised, just slightly annoyed. "Yeah," I replied, setting my keys down. "Thought we could hang out." She nodded, didn't smile, didn't ask about my day. I started chopping vegetables in the kitchen, tried to force normalcy back into the space, but the silence was sharp. It wasn't quiet. It was heavy. When I finally asked her if everything was okay, she didn't even pretend. Closed the laptop, folded her hands. "I've been thinking about us," she said, and my heart dropped like a lead weighed into my stomach. It was the tone, detached, practiced, and I already knew whatever came next was going to be the beginning of something I couldn't undo. When Melody told me she needed space, I didn't shout, didn't beg, didn't even ask her to reconsider, because I knew, deep down, her mind had already made the leap long before those words left her mouth. She didn't say she was unhappy. She didn't accuse me of failing her, and she didn't confess to anything that would have made it easier to hate her. Instead, she spoke with the kind of quiet confidence that comes only from rehearsing every possible response, like someone preparing to deliver news they don't want to be interrupted while giving. Her explanation wasn't complicated, but the simplicity was what made it insulting. She said she needed clarity, said she couldn't move forward unless she knew whether her feelings for Drew were truly gone. And if she didn't explore that, she'd always wonder if she'd made the wrong choice by staying with me. I asked her, point blank, what this clarity was supposed to look like. Was she planning to meet him for coffee, talk things out like adults, come home with certainty? Or was she thinking of picking up where they left off and seeing if the old flame still burned? She didn't answer right away, which was answer enough. Eventually, she mumbled something about how she didn't have a plan, but needed to follow her intuition. I couldn't even be angry in that moment. I was too stunned. It was like someone had changed the language mid-conversation, and I was the only one who hadn't gotten the memo. She was speaking nonsense, and I was expected to nod along while she dismantled our life like it was some trial version of a relationship she could abandon without consequences. What stuck with me wasn't just her selfishness. It was the assumption underneath it. Melody truly believed she could hit pause on our engagement, go test drive her past like a used car, and then return to me if things didn't pan out. She framed it like a noble act, as if her honesty was a gift I should be grateful for, not the detonation of everything we'd built together. She didn't cry, didn't plead for understanding. She just stood there, waiting for me to rubber stamp her emotional field trip with a nod and a sad smile. And I gave it to her, not because I agreed, but because I wanted her gone. I told her to take the space she needed, but I didn't say I'd be waiting. She must have missed that part. She packed a bag that night and told me she'd stay at her mom's for a bit. I didn't ask when she'd be back. I didn't even say goodbye. I just watched her walk out of the house like she was heading to a weekend yoga retreat instead of a possible reunion with the man who once broke her heart. Once the door closed behind her, I stood in the living room in absolute silence, feeling the weight of her absence and the sharper weight of her audacity. I wasn't sad. Not yet. I was numb, and in that numbness came a strange kind of clarity of my own. I knew right then that I was done being someone's second option. If she thought I was a backup plan, then she'd find out how it felt when the backup doesn't wait around. I picked up my phone and called Troy. He answered on the second ring, his voice casual, unaware he was about to hear the dumbest thing I'd ever lived through. Melody wants to take a break to figure things out with Drew, I said before he could even say hello. There was a long pause, then a low whistle. You're serious? He asked. She actually said that. I told him everything. The card game, the distance, the absurd request for space. He didn't try to cheer me up or say anything cliche. He just said what I needed to hear. That's not someone who respects you, man. You don't owe her a damn thing. We talked for hours. By the time I hung up, the numbness had burned off, replaced by a focused fury I hadn't felt in years. Not the screaming kind, the methodical kind, the kind that gets things done. The next morning, I woke up early and started deleting. First went the shared wedding planning folder on my laptop, the one with all the venue quotes, catering menus, and dress inspiration boards she'd stopped updating months ago. Then I opened my email and began canceling every vendor we contacted. The florist, the photographer, the band she insisted on hiring from Charlotte. One by one, I sent polite, impersonal emails letting them know the wedding was no longer moving forward. Some deposits were lost. I didn't care. It was worth every dollar to clear the deck. After the logistics were handled, I turned to the physical remnants. Melody had left most of her things behind. Books she never read, framed prints she refused to hang until the walls felt right, and throw pillows I never liked in the first place. I boxed everything up neatly, labeled it, and loaded it into my truck. I didn't text her, didn't call. I just dropped it all at her mom's front door with a note tucked inside the top box. Here's your stuff. Hope Drew gives you all the clarity you need. The moment I drove away, I felt something I hadn't felt since the proposal. Control. I wasn't flailing anymore. I wasn't wondering what went wrong. I was making decisions for myself. That weekend, I called a realtor Troy recommended, explained that I wanted the house listed ASAP, and didn't flinch when she asked if I was sure. It wasn't just about the breakup. It was about shedding everything tied to Melody. Every corner of that place had her in it. The wallpaper she picked, the cookware she insisted on buying, the stack of dusty magazines with dog-eared pages for kitchen remodels we were never going to do. I didn't want any of it. The funny thing is, when you take control of your life, people notice. A week after Melody left, I got a text from her. Just 3 words, "Can we talk?" I stared at it for a minute, then typed back 1 word, "Sure." She showed up the next day dressed like she was auditioning for a part in a rom-com, all carefully understated makeup and fake vulnerability. She stepped inside, immediately scanning the space like something was missing, which it was. Half the furniture had already been sold. She sat on the couch like she still lived there and launched in her pitch. She wanted to pause the wedding while she sorted through her feelings. No backup, just time. She even used the word investment, like we were managing a joint stock portfolio instead of a 5-year relationship. I let her finish. Let her talk herself in circles while I nodded like I was still under her spell. Then I stood up and said, "If you need time, take it. Just don't expect anything to be waiting when you're done." Her expression cracked for the first time. She wasn't expecting resistance. She was expecting patience. But I wasn't giving her either. She left, confused and rattled, but still in denial. Probably thought I'd come around eventually, realized she was just going through something and beg her to try again. But I'd already moved on, not to another person, just to a version of myself that didn't need to be chosen second. It wasn't even a full week after that awkward couch conversation before Melody started doing what people like her always do when they feel the control slipping through their fingers. she began managing the narrative. First, it started subtly. A mutual friend, Kylie, texted me one afternoon to ask if I was doing okay and that everyone's so shocked about what happened. I asked her what exactly she meant by shocked, and she sent back a screenshot of a group chat where Melody had apparently shared that the wedding was temporarily on hold because I was having doubts about whether I was ready to commit. According to her, I'd been cold and distant for months, and she was doing everything she could to be patient while I sorted through my emotional confusion. I stared at the screen in disbelief. She didn't just twist the truth. She steamrolled it, set fire to the remains, and painted herself as some kind of tragic martyr clinging to hope while her broken fiancé fell apart under the weight of his own issues. I didn't even respond to Kylie. There was no point trying to fix a story that Melody had already rewritten in her favor. Instead, I sent a short message to the handful of people who actually mattered to me, my mom, my sister, my two closest friends, and told them everything. I didn't exaggerate, didn't play the victim. I laid it out plainly. Melody asked for a break to reconnect with her ex, and I ended the engagement because I refused to be anyone's backup plan. That was it. Clean, simple, and the truth. But Melody wasn't done. 2 days later, I got a call from my mom who, by her tone, had already worked herself into a level 7 anxiety spiral. Apparently, Melody's mother had called her to express concern about my erratic behavior and sudden withdrawal from the relationship. My mom, who was trying very hard to remain neutral, asked me what was going on, her voice laced with confusion and quiet judgment. I could hear the doubt creeping in, not because she believed Melody, but because the details were too vague to fight. "Did you just change your mind about the wedding?" she asked softly, like maybe I'd had a breakdown I hadn't told her about. I cut her off quickly and calmly. "No, Mom, I didn't change my mind." Melody left to see if she still had feelings for Drew. I canceled everything after that. The silence that followed was heavy, but it was also clarifying. After a few seconds, she sighed and muttered, "Why the hell would she tell her mother the opposite?" I didn't answer because the truth was too pathetic to say out loud. Melody was building a story in case things with Drew didn't work out, and she wanted to slide back into our life later with sympathy on her side. If it had ended there, I might have just let it go. I'd already blocked Melody from everything: my phone, my social media, even my email after she sent one too many just checking in messages with the fake sweetness of someone who only says sorry when caught. But then it started bleeding into my professional life. I was sitting in my office on a Wednesday morning when my manager, Jackson, knocked and poked his head in. "Hey man, everything all right with you?" he asked carefully, like he was trying to step over invisible glass. I nodded, confused. He cleared his throat and said, "Just wondering because I got a call from someone I know over at Summit Group. She said your ex-fiancé is going through something and your name came up a few times. I don't need details, just making sure it won't affect anything here." That was the moment I realized Melody hadn't just tried to spin the story for our families. She was actively poisoning the well anywhere she thought I had influence or respect. I don't even know why she brought up my name to people at Summit. Maybe she thought it would get back to me, or maybe she genuinely believed she had a right to frame me however she needed to feel justified. After that, I stopped playing defense and went fully quiet. No more reactions. No more emotional replies. I changed my social media settings to private, took down every old photo that included her, and reached out to the real estate agent again to lower the price on the house just enough to make sure it would sell faster. The less trace of Melody in my life, the better. The day the listing went live, I opened a bottle of whiskey I'd been saving for the wedding toast and poured myself a glass. It felt poetic in a cruel, satisfying way. That same night, I got another message, this time from Troy, who had seen Melody's latest Instagram story. It was a blurry photo of some wine glass on a windowsill, overlaid with one of those vague breakup quotes. "Sometimes we have to lose what we love to find who we are." I laughed when I saw it, because the caption under the quote said, "Healing isn't linear," followed by a sad face emoji and a playlist link filled with indie breakup anthems. Melody wasn't healing. She was marketing her own self-pity. Every post was curated to make people ask questions, to invite attention, to keep her at the center of a story she had already been written out of. And judging by the comments from her friends, it was working. That was when I made the final decision. I wasn't going to let her control a single piece of the story anymore. The next morning, I sent a short but direct message to our shared friend group and both families. Hey everyone, just to clarify, Melody and I are no longer engaged. She asked for space to pursue a connection with someone else, and I chose to end things. Please respect our privacy and don't reach out with questions. Thanks. That was it. No dramatics, no emotion. Just facts. I hit send and blocked every number I didn't recognize. The fallout was immediate and noisy. Melody tried to call me 3 times within the hour. Then she left a voicemail where she sounded like she was about to cry, but not the kind of crying that comes from regret, more like the kind people use when they know they're about to lose a game and want to reset the board. I didn't think you'd make this public, she said, voice trembling with performative sincerity. I thought we agreed to keep things between us. That made me laugh out loud, standing barefoot in my kitchen with a coffee in one hand and her voice echoing through the speaker like a bad actress reading someone else's apology script. Keep things between us. After she'd told her entire circle I was the one who bailed? After she'd started making vague posts to generate sympathy? No, that ship had sailed, burned, and sunk to the bottom of the ocean. I didn't respond. I didn't need to. The silence was louder than anything I could have said. What she wanted was access. What she got was a locked door and an empty driveway. I don't know if she ever realized that Drew wasn't going to be her happy ending. I don't know what conversations they had, if any. I just know that the second she decided to treat me like an optional chapter, I rewrote the whole book without her in it. 3 weeks after I sent that final group message, the noise finally started to die down, at least on my end. I could go a full day without hearing someone mention Melody's name or seeing one of her passive-aggressive quotes floating through someone else's feed. People had finally accepted that the engagement was over, that I wasn't explaining anything beyond what I'd already said. And if they pushed for details, they weren't going to get them from me. What surprised me wasn't that the world moved on, but how fast it did once I stopped participating in her drama. That's when I learned the real trick to dismantling someone else's narrative. Just stop feeding it. Let their performance echo in silence. And eventually, the audience leaves the theater. But Melody wasn't quite finished performing. She never reached out directly again after the voicemail she left about keeping things private, but she found other ways to try and claw her way back into my world. She started messaging people I hadn't spoken to in years. Friends from college, coworkers from a job I left half a decade ago, telling them some version of the same story. That she was blindsided, that she gave everything to the relationship, that she was still holding out hope I'd come around. It wasn't even subtle anymore. It was strategic. She wanted to keep herself connected to me any way she could, and if she couldn't do it through me, she'd do it through proximity. The worst part was that it worked, at least for a few of them. I got messages from old contacts checking in, asking if I was doing okay, and one even offered to mediate if I ever wanted to talk things through with her. I deleted every message without replying. Then one afternoon, I got a call from Troy while I was at the gym. I almost didn't answer, but something about the timing made me pick up. "You're not going to believe this," he said, not even saying hello. Melody just went live on her coaching page. She's calling herself a relationship clarity expert. I paused mid-rep, wiped my face with a towel, and asked him to repeat it. "She's starting some kind of coaching business," he continued, clearly barely holding back laughter. "She said she's helping people move on from toxic attachments and reclaim their power after abandonment." I didn't know whether to laugh or punch the wall. Melody, the same woman who had packed a bag to go reconnect with the ex who cheated on her, was now monetizing the story where I was the villain. I pulled up the page later that night. It was a masterpiece of manipulation. Carefully curated quotes, glamour shots of her staring pensively into the distance, and a list of services that included One-on-one coaching calls for navigating heartbreak and customized recovery roadmaps, all built on a foundation of fiction. I didn't say anything publicly. I didn't call her out, but I started documenting everything because now I knew she wasn't just looking for closure. She was trying to leverage my name to build something for herself. She hadn't moved on. She had turned our failed engagement into a business model, and I wasn't going to let that stand if she crossed any legal lines. But karma's funny. You don't always have to deliver it yourself. A few weeks later, my sister sent me a link to a Facebook post from Melody's mother. It was one of those vague family update rants disguised as a heartfelt message. In it, she mentioned that they were facing financial hardship, that they'd taken on a lot of debt during the planned wedding, and that certain people had walked away when they should have honored their commitments. I read it twice just to make sure I wasn't misunderstanding. Apparently, Melody had convinced her family to front several of the wedding deposits, promising they'd recoup it all after the honeymoon, once things stabilized. Except there was no wedding, no honeymoon, no stability, just a string of non-refundable charges and a daughter who now claimed to be a victim of abandonment. I should have felt vindicated. I should have celebrated the moment the weight of her lies came crashing down. But all I felt was disgust. Not for what she did to them, but for how easily she lied to everyone while trying to rewrite reality. I kept my distance. Didn't comment. Didn't respond when I started getting tagged in anonymous posts about men who vanish when it gets hard. I let it all float past me like background noise. Then, like clockwork, she resurfaced in the most pathetic way imaginable. One morning, I checked my inbox and saw an email from a burner account. No name, no subject, just one sentence. I miss you. Can we talk? I didn't need confirmation. I knew exactly who sent it. I didn't reply, not because I didn't have things I wanted to say, but because I was finally at a point where I didn't care if she understood any of it. Let her sit with the silence. Let her guess if I even read it. That was the only answer she deserved. By then, the house was already under contract, and I had moved into a smaller apartment on the opposite side of town. No shared memories in the walls. No rooms she once decorated. No shadows of her voice echoing through the hallways. Just clean floors, white walls, and silence I didn't have to explain to anyone. For the first time in over 5 years, my space was mine again. Around that same time, I got promoted. New title, better pay, more responsibility, but more importantly, it came with a shift in how people treated me. I wasn't the guy whose wedding got called off anymore. I was just Grant again. The version of me that existed before Melody stepped in and tried to turn our life into a performance. That same week, I reconnected with someone I hadn't seen since college. Reese. She worked in corporate branding now, had this calm energy that made everything around her feel easier to manage. We grabbed coffee once, then again, then dinner. I didn't tell her about Melody. I didn't need to. Reese asked real questions, listened without trying to fix me, and had a laugh that made it hard to remember why I'd spent so long chasing a future with someone who never once asked what I needed. One night, while we were walking to her car after a late dinner, my phone buzzed. It was a notification from an account I didn't follow, one of those drama-hungry Instagram pages that reposted messy online stories for engagement. There, front and center, was a screenshot of one of Melody's newest posts. She was crying in her car, mascara streaked, captioned with a paragraph about what happens when you trust someone who isn't ready to love you back. I showed it to Reese. She just raised an eyebrow and said, "Do people actually believe this stuff?" I laughed and said, "Only the ones who want to." We drove off without another word about it. That was the moment I realized something had shifted permanently. Melody wasn't just my past. She had become irrelevant to my present. I wasn't living my life in reaction to her anymore. I wasn't shaping my days around undoing her damage. I wasn't hoping for redemption, revenge, or recognition. I was building something entirely new, and she wasn't even a footnote in it. Let her keep posting. Let her keep spinning. I had better things to do. About 2 months after Reese and I started seeing each other more consistently, I got a call from Troy while I was getting ready for work. His voice came through the speaker, half laughing, half sputtering, like he couldn't even believe what he was about to say. "You're not going to believe this, man." Melody's engaged. I stopped brushing my teeth and stared at my own reflection, waiting for the punchline. But he was serious. She posted on her main page some filtered photo of a ring on her finger, held up like she just won an Olympic medal. The caption read, "True love always finds its way back." I didn't recognize the guy beside her in the photo, but from what little I could gather, he was some wannabe entrepreneur who ran a podcast about unlocking your higher self through hustle and clean eating. Every photo of him screamed ego. Tank tops, crypto references, vague motivational quotes. I wanted to be surprised, but I wasn't. Melody didn't know how to be alone. She didn't heal. She rebranded. And when her last story fell apart, she needed a new one fast. This guy wasn't a partner. He was a prop, just like I had been. Only this time, she was doubling down. Her comments were filled with people cheering her on, telling her how brave she was, how she deserved happiness after everything she'd been through. I didn't comment. I didn't send it to anyone. I just sat there, quietly shaking my head at how far removed she was from the reality we actually lived in. A few weeks later, the cracks started showing. First, it was a cryptic tweet about betrayal. Then she archived all their photos together. Then Reese showed me a TikTok someone had stitched from Melody's page where she sat in her car, crying, again, talking about how she gave everything and got nothing back. I didn't feel smug. I didn't laugh. I just felt tired. Tired of how predictable she was. Tired of how everything in her life became content. There was no moment too private for her to broadcast. Every failure became someone else's fault. Every ending became a beginning she didn't ask for. Then one night, I got a message from a number I didn't recognize. Just a single line, "I've been doing a lot of thinking. I miss you. I wish we could talk." I deleted it without responding. I didn't need confirmation. I knew it was her. And I knew that the second I opened that door, she'd try to crawl back in and repaint the walls like nothing had ever cracked. But the truth is, she had done me the biggest favor of my life. Because of her, I learned what I would never tolerate again. I learned how to spot the difference between someone who wants you and someone who needs you to play a part in their story. I learned how to trust my instincts when something feels wrong, even if there's no hard proof. I learned that love isn't just about time, history, or comfort. It's about consistency, clarity, and mutual effort every single day. And Melody never offered any of those things. Reese, on the other hand, never had to prove anything. She didn't perform. She didn't post quotes or drop hints when something bothered her. She just talked to me. She listened without trying to rewrite the conversation. She supported me without demanding I change to make her more comfortable. And for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I had to earn love through sacrifice. People always say the best revenge is living well, but they rarely explain what that actually means. It doesn't mean flaunting your new life for validation. It doesn't mean rushing into someone else's arms just to prove you weren't the problem. It means peace. It means waking up without dread in your chest. It means building something real, something quiet, something rooted in respect, not obligation. So no, I never got the apology. I never got the closure speech. I never got the dramatic confession where she admitted she was wrong and I was right. What I got instead was distance, perspective, and the unexpected joy of finally choosing myself. And honestly, I wouldn't trade that for any apology in the world.